There are those that would make the argument that everything that has went on is more about profit. And in some respects, that's true. However, once you reach a certain level of financial security, profit isn't really that important because you already have so much money that any more is really not that big of a rush. That's when it becomes all about control. One of my favorite terms for people like that is more money than sense. And one way or another, we've all seen it in some aspect or another. Someone has so much coin on their side that they can afford to make big mistakes and just pay their way out of it. That's what separates them from the rest of us because we can't afford to live our lives that way. We make one minor mistake, it can take months, if not years, to recover from. Something the people with more money than sense don't have to deal with. Ever since 2016, we have all watched this play out in various ways on many social media platforms. Oddly enough, not too long after Hillary Clinton, the Queen of Farts, as I like to call her, floated the idea of banning conservatives from social media. And shortly thereafter, all of the left leaning corporations and social media platforms jumped right on board. And that's exactly what happened. And it had obviously less to do with making money than it did about their control over the system and the people, as a matter of fact. As most of you have figured out by now, I'm sure, the people with the money and the power are more concerned with the way things look than the way that things are. And they will attempt to change the narrative to suit their version of how they'd like to present the way things should look. Flying in the face of what the regular people, like you and me, know to be true about our daily lives. So, in other words, they have lost touch with reality and the people that actually put the money in their pockets. You can use this particular platform as an example. They have silenced so many people's voices that they can no longer spread the advertising out in an equal way. That's why instead of, like it used to be, you'd maybe catch one commercial at the beginning of the video, now you catch two. Because they are quite literally shrinking their advertising space down to where they can't spread out their advertising amongst all the people who use their platform. This, in the end, is bad business. And anyone who's even dabbled in self-employment or trying to launch their own business or whatever knows you can't limit yourself like that, because eventually you will run yourself down to a box so tight that nobody's going to want to advertise with you. That, or you end up with a platform or outlet so loaded with ads that it distorts or takes away from the media or the shows that you're trying to watch. You can use mainstream television as an example. You can't watch a show anymore and really get anything out of it because there's way too much advertising on them. Sporting events, are basically ruined. I don't watch racing anymore because you spend more time watching advertising than you do watching the actual event. A lot of people have wondered why the president hasn't got involved or the Justice Department hasn't got involved with the social media aspect of things and what they have been doing to regular people. The answer is quite simple. They're killing themselves. And why should you take preventive measures to keep them from killing themselves when they're, for the most part, against the regular people? Just let them do what they've been doing, and eventually they'll put themselves out of business. I don't watch football anymore, and it has to do with the fact that they went against the freedom that this country stands for. I understand the message they were trying to send, but it still offended me to the point where I don't watch it anymore. I love football. I know all about it. But I ain't watching that garbage because the people that run it allowed that to happen. And the same could be said for social media companies. They allowed un American activities to go on, and for the most part, our civil rights to free speech and free expression to be undermined. That's what antitrust laws are supposed to be all about. Because every time this happens, when some organization is allowed to establish a monopoly, it becomes more about control than it does about profit. And that's the argument that I would make against socialism. Because in the end, that's a governmental monopoly, which always leads towards corruption. Or at least that's what history would tell us. And these are the things that civil wars are made of. Someone else gets rich and takes power on the backs of the people and eventually thinks that they're better than everyone else and has the right to rule over them however they see fit. And in this particular case, has realized in order to maintain their power, they have to circle back and corrupt the system. That's why the schools operate the way they do nowadays. History is not that big of a deal. Pointing out why the Constitution was established isn't stressed. Therefore, the idea of communism and socialism is allowed to grow, and people don't know who are coming up in the next generations where that leads to. Excess. And the people who gave the power are considered inferior to those who received the power. And in this case, when it's all exposed, everyone's going to find out that their fun is not our fun. And they have been doing things behind the scenes that none of us would agree with. And that's when everyone's going to be faced with a choice. Is it more about entertainment and fun during your off hours? Or do you stand up and stand behind the foundations of our freedom in order to preserve it? Or just look the other way and let these gold diggers undermine the whole thing?